Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&As, so let me get my hat on. Let's get this started. Alright, first question. Jason, while bulking, how can I continue to up the calories to ensure that I don't plateau? I'm still a novice running your 2 per week program. Is there a formula like body weight times 1.5 equals total daily calories? Elliott Hulse subscribed to a formula like that for helping people bulking. Alright, brother. People always do stuff like that. They try to use these body weight multipliers, and actually it's usually 15. So if you weighed 200 pounds, 3,500 calories. Here's the problem with that. Doesn't account for individual activity, doesn't account for individual muscle mass, doesn't account for the small variations in metabolism. How are you going to follow something like that? You telling me that a pair of 200-pound guys who want to bulk slowly, one of them does cardio and has a physically active job, the other doesn't do as much cardio and has a desk job, even if they have the same amount of muscle on the same lifting routine? You honestly tell me their calories are going to be even close? The first guy's cutting calories will probably be as high as the other guy's bulking calories, if not higher. So what you really need to do, once you have your activity consistent, you need to calculate what your rough maintenance calories is. You can track what you eat, get an idea, and if you're gaining or losing weight in the first week or two, you can adjust based upon that. Alright, and when you get to a point to where when your base activity is set, you're on a rough amount of calories and you gain almost no weight or lose no weight, you stay at pretty much the same weight through a week, that's your maintenance calories. I'm going to recommend for most guys who want a clean bulk, they want to bulk slow. Let's say you come up with 2,800, just throwing a number out there. Increase it by about 10%. Increase it by 10%. And this is if you want a slow bulk, and that's usually what I'm going to recommend. Most people don't want to bulk fast unless drugs are in the mix, or you don't really care about body composition. You're just pursuing absolute strength. So that's what you have to factor in. So how do you keep from stalling? Don't worry about if you stall a little bit. You can always bump your calories later. And what I mean is, let's say you're at 2,800 is your rough estimate. Increase it by 10%. All right, that's about 3,000 to 3,100 calories. Run that until you stop gaining weight. Weigh yourself. If you go 2 weeks with no change on the scale, all right, 2 weeks with no change on the scale, probably need to bump your calories a little bit. Now, that being said, I have had someone who ran my novice program, and I watched their logs because I had recommended this originally, and they wanted to bulk. And you know what? I saw in their log that over the course of the year, they had to bump their calories by 10% around 7 different times. Like, they started with their bulk at around 2,600 calories. And by the time they reached the end of that year, in order to even consistently keep gaining body weight, they were on something like 3,700, 3,800 calories. All right, and they were still gaining even at that, because they started pretty skinny. They started down in the 140s. All right, and that person ended up gaining something like 26, 27 pounds, okay, over the course of that year. But he ended up increasing his calories at least 1,000 just over the course of that bulking. Of what he was gaining weight on 1,000 less calories at the start that he was gaining at the finish. And even with that 1,000 calorie increase, he was gaining around 1 pound to 1.5 pounds a month. So that's how you need to track it. You need to keep up with it, and every time you stop gaining weight at all, you need to increase it. And I'm going to tell most guys, if you're bulking and you want to bulk clean, you probably don't want to gain more than about 2 to 3 pounds a month. I wouldn't gain more than about 2 to 3 pounds a month unless you don't mind gaining a lot of extra fat. Probably the way to do it. Now, a little bit of fat gain is not a big deal. In fact, expect to gain a little bit of fat if you're truly making fast muscle gains as a natty. But that's how you need to go about it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, would utilizing hypertrophy blocks and strength blocks, switching between them for maximum specificity, benefit a novice or intermediate lifter, or is it just for advanced ones, or is it totally unnecessary for non-competitive fellas? Alright, what you need to understand, you're talking about periodization at this point, and you don't necessarily need to think of it as just hypertrophy blocks. You can think of it as how much volume you're using, how many reps you're using, because strength and hypertrophy aren't separable. Don't think in those terms. Think in terms of metabolic fatigue, based overall strength, volume, power, speed work, things like that. That's how you really need to think of your blocks. But they're not necessarily strength versus hypertrophy, all right? But if you're wanting to do that, let's say I'm assuming you mean by hypertrophy 8 to 12 reps, and strength maybe you mean, I don't know, 4 to 6 reps. Those are both still hypertrophy, really, and both still strength. But let's assume that's what you mean. You don't need to do that as a novice, and the reason I say that, you will gain slower as a novice if you do that. Novice lifters are characterized by the ability to continue to add weight to the bar regularly, all right? Most novice lifters make the most progress using some sort of linear progression. Linear progression is king for the novice lifter. Periodization of any type starts to become more helpful when you're an intermediate. So, I mean, you could do that as an intermediate, but here's the thing. When we start periodizing, even for the intermediate, you need to understand you're just pursuing a small advantage. A person could just as easily do what I've talked about before, working with 5 reps with a weight and slowly adding reps as you're able to, when you can do them comfortably and easily till you get to 10, then increasing weight, dropping to 5 again. People can do that and make great gains. When you're talking about periodization, you're trying to look at that and say, okay, that's good, but I want to do 2 or 3% better. All right, I want to gain, I don't know, X amount of muscle. I want to gain 1 ounce muscle more than that this year, so I'm going to use a more complex system to avoid stalling, because that's all it is. You're simply avoiding stalls at all in your progression, because that will slow you down a little bit. So you're simply saying, I want to gain 30 pounds on my bench press this year instead of 28 or 29. That's the reason we go to periodization. It reduces some of the stalling and law of adaptation a little bit. That's what it does. But it's not like a magic cure-all. You're not going to see a massive difference. If you see a massive difference between even some slow basic linear progression, by switching to a periodization method, if you see a massive difference, your other training was really, really bad. It should only be a small difference, but it is a real measurable difference. But again, it's for people who are chasing maximum progress in some way, and that's the difference. And keep in mind that maximum progress comes with a degree of complexity, with a degree of dedication to hit all your periodization blocks, making sure your lifestyle allows for you to not get sick or miss time. There's a lot more to it. It requires a higher degree of dedication, but it is a pretty small payout in terms of the difference. But it is there. But if you do that as a novice, you're going to gain slower. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what are your thoughts on microwave, steam, and bag vegetables? Has there been research similar to microwave popcorn showing links to certain types of cancer? I can't imagine microwaving vegetables in a plastic bag to be the same as cutting fresh veg and cooking them in a pan yourself, but I'm interested to see your take on this. Thanks in advance. All right, I don't know about the plastic bags themselves, but as far as microwaving frozen vegetables, actually the reality is it shows a better nutrition than what most people are buying. The reason, usually when you're buying produce at the grocery store that you didn't go cut today yourself, it is several days old. All right, as vegetables, once they've been cut, they lose vitamins, they lose phytonutrients, everything pretty much every single day. A small amount they go down. What has historically been found is that anything but fresh cut vegetables, meaning you went and cut them in your garden the same day and cooked them and steamed them in a pan or whatever, you're going to find that they're going to have a less nutritional value than the vegetables that were picked and frozen the same day, because the freezing process preserves them. And then you microwave them, they end up having more total vitamins and more phytonutrients than the vegetables you bought that at the store that are fresh that you went and cooked. They actually tend to have a little more nutritional value. It's not a massive difference, but if you had to pick and choose, technically that's actually the better choice. The freezing itself is a preservation process, and microwaving is quick and it breaks it down less, breaks down some of the vitamin C and other stuff a little less. That's not really a big deal. I wouldn't sit around worrying about it though. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on the Doug Hepburn Method, A, B, C, and using them in an undulating fashion throughout the year? 3 months of A, 3 months of B, etc. I don't know that I like everything about the Doug Hepburn Method. It's certainly old. It's certainly been tried and true. It's certainly proven. I don't think it's perfect. But what you're trying to do, no, I think that's silly. Doug Hepburn intended for people to run each of these methods like a year. and you kind of max out the gains on them. Undulating through different phases of things that are kind of intended. This is a little more for the novice, is a little more for the intermediate. That's like saying I'm going to undulate a novice and intermediate in an advanced program every year. So it's like 4 years into your training, would you go back and run my novice program for 3 months and then my intermediate program for 3 months and then run an advanced program for 3 months? Of course you wouldn't. Doesn't make sense, does it, when you look at it in that context? So no, probably not the best approach here. Probably not the best approach. All right, next question. What do you think about auto-regulating volume? For example, take a weight you can do 8 perfect reps with and do as many sets with perfect form reps, leaving 1 to 2 in the tank until you get down to 4 to 5 rep sets. I mean, that's one way to do it. You're going to end up having a fair amount of volume that way. I'm not saying that's the best way to write a program. But you're certainly going to develop a lot of metabolic fatigue that way, and I think a person could make reasonable gains doing that. Again, that would be a little harder to write into an actual program, and might be a little harder to do with multiple big exercises in a workout, but it could be done as long as you pay attention to your body and, like you said, auto-regulate everything well. I don't think that's an unreasonable approach. You could do that. I mean, like I said, it's going to take you several sets. If you take an 8 rep max and you're leaving 1 or 2 in the tank, or does it say you're doing 8 reps? What are you talking about doing? Okay, yeah, leaving 1 or 2 in the tank. So you're probably going to do 7 reps the first couple sets. Then you'll probably end up doing 6, then 6 maybe again, then 5. So you're going to do about 5 to 6 sets with an 8 rep max and do it that way. I don't think it's unreasonable, but you know what I think is going to happen? I think honestly, it's going to be just like doing a 5x5. I think when you're done, your total tonnage and the weights you use and everything are just going to be similar to doing a 5x5. It's just a different way of doing it. I think it's going to be very, very similar. But it's not a reasonable person could do it that way. I don't think it would be a bad way to train if that's what you chose to do and you're trying to do a decent number of sets for metabolic fatigue. All right, next question. If someone only uses hammer strength and similar equipment, would the hypertrophic response be similar? I know they'll be missing out the other benefits like stabilizer strength, athleticism, etc. But just looking at it from a hypertrophic point of view, how close would it be? You know, we could argue about this a lot. We could argue about different stuff of stabilizers and radiant effect and everything possibly increasing overall hypertrophy. And you're forgetting the fact that taking stabilizers themselves out reduces overall hypertrophy through your body because a lot more muscles get involved. They get a lot of secondary work from doing a lot of big standing barbell work and everything. I think in terms of just some of your primary movers, the show muscles, I think all things considered, as long as tension and workload on them are similar, I think you're going to see similar hypertrophy things. But here's the point I come down to, and this is the reason I don't like this idea. Because it's the idea of saying, I want to train purely for bodybuilding, put in the same amount of time and same amount of work and get less overall benefits because I'm only chasing one goal. You know, and I think that's a point that needs to be made. You're going to have less core strength. You're going to have less total stabilizers. You're going to have less overall hypertrophy in theory, particularly through things like the core and the spinal erectors and the glutes and things like that doing this sort of training. And you're also going to have less athleticism, less full body strength. It's not going to carry over to other stuff more. And it's a question I would always ask is why? Like, why would anyone choose to do that? It's like, if I'm going to put in the same amount of work, same amount of hours in the gym for any given thing, wouldn't I want to get multiple benefits from it? Even if they're benefits I don't care about a lot, they might come in handy. You know, it's almost like if you're going to go to a job, let's say you go pick up a secondary job and it's the similar style of work. I don't care what it is, whether it's computer programming or baking or anything else. And you have one company that's offering for you to do a very, very similar job. Maybe it's a little different because the company's slightly different. Same basic type of job, but one of them only gives you the paycheck that you want because you're doing it purely for money. That's your only goal. But the other one offers you a 401k, better health insurance, and they have a lot of company picnics and parties on the side, and the other one doesn't. That's the way I would look at it. If you're going to put in the work, wouldn't you want some of the extra fringe benefits if you're already going to have to put in the same number of hours, same amount of time, same amount of effort into what you're doing? I'd want to pick up some of the extra benefits even if they weren't my primary reason for being there. And I guess that's a different way of looking at it. But in terms of the direct hypertrophy on the primary movers, I think they're going to be pretty similar. There's no reason to think they wouldn't be. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.